Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Stephen Nussbaum, in the podcast where I invite my guests to come on and talk to me all about their musical tastes, their memories, their experiences, and they get to collate their fantasy festivals, which I have christened Fantastivals. We are now on episode number 179. I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone had a lovely Father's Day last weekend. So a massive kudos to all the fathers out there who do a great job. And also a massive thank you to Sergi and Jared from Ways Away, who are my guests in the last episode of the Fantastival Podcast. Two great guys, a great band. Go and listen to their new album if you haven't already, I'm Not You. It's a superb album. You won't regret that one. So Sergi and Jared, top men, great podcast. So that was 178. This is 179. And a few weeks ago, I went to see one of my favourite acts of all time, the awesome Jesse Malin, make his long-awaited return to London. And I was lucky enough to be there early. I always like to get there early to catch support acts. I think it's a massive part of the gig. I did get there early with my mates. We caught the next gent, who was Jesse's support act. He had some killer songs, great stories, had us all captivated. And my mates were like, we have to get him on the podcast. I agreed. He accepted. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to introduce singer, songwriter, guitarist, record producer, the one and only is Lee Tasjan.
Hello. Good afternoon. Good evening. Good day. Good to see you.
Likewise, Aaron. I'm so glad we can do this. I'm obviously 6 hours ahead of you, so it's my early evening. It's your lunchtime. Before we kick in, we've had a really nice conversation about alternative milks. So I know we're both fans of alternative milks. We've already got that in common. But before we kick off,
right,
I always like to ask my guests how they're doing. I think mental health is really important to check in. So before we start talking music and more, which I'm really looking forward to you, how are you generally, Aaron?
Yeah, I think I'm doing probably similarly to the way a lot of folks feel in America right now. It's really wild times over here. We just witnessed our president throwing himself a 79th birthday party in the form of a massive military parade that not very many people attended. Predictably, that was $40 million it cost to put that on. That easily could have gone to feeding people, housing people, investing in our healthcare, investing in our infrastructure. I mean, I drive around the country a lot as a touring musician, and our roads have massive potholes in them and stuff like that that'll just wreck the suspension on your vehicle as soon as you drive over it. There's a lot of things that we could have used that money for. So yeah, it's an interesting time if you're kind of paying attention to anything that's happening over here. But I really feel like what I am lucky to do for my vocation, writing songs and being in community with people and performing and sharing art, is kind of like the antidote to feeling all of this crazy stuff that we're going through at the moment. And I feel very fortunate to be working right now and will continue to do so as we move forward through whatever is coming next. Hard to predict. So in that way, I think I feel a combination of many different feelings. It's a bit of a roller coaster from day to day, moment to moment. But right now, I feel really good. I feel really grateful to be here with you and with your listeners. And just looking forward to a great conversation.
Likewise. So let me take you back then to where it all started for you, Aaron. What are your kind of earliest musical memories? What do you remember about being young and listening to music?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, for very early on, it was just kind of whatever mom or dad were playing in the car, kind of when they came to pick you up from school. So my mom, that was kind of all the great kind of folk rock stuff and rock and roll music of her era. Bob Dylan, the Byrds, the Stones, the Beatles, huge, all that kind of stuff. My dad was a jazz musician and a massive fan of big band music, so I was hearing a lot of the Count Basie Orchestra. I was hearing, Duke Ellington Big Band. My dad was a huge Stan Kenton fan, who was very interesting big band leader. He was sort of known for these sort of swelling emotional ballads. And so I got this kind of like sort of duality of really introspective, lyrical focused music from my mom's side. And then from my dad's side, this kind of bigger, more expansive instrumental sound that was very intricate and had all these different parts kind of interweaving together to make this kind of massive, sound. And those two things, I would say, have found their way into my own music through the years in many different ways. But my earliest memories of music were just kind of listening to what my folks were playing on the car ride home from school or to school in the morning.
And what about your own first records and your first singles? You remember buying those and what they were and those experiences?
I do, yeah. They were on, cassette tape initially. I was, a few of my friends had CD players, but I was kind of slow to switch over from my Sony Walkman cassette player that I had. But yeah, the first things that I bought on my own, I started playing guitar at 11 years old. I want to say it was like 1994 or 5 maybe. And the big thing at the time was the Beatles anthology. And so that was, the reimagined version by Jeff Lynne of John Lennon's demo for Free as a Bird really just captured my imagination as an 11-year-old dude. And I got the Beatles anthology. That was probably the first thing I bought with my own money, and just listened to that over and over and over again. The things that I was seeing on MTV that were grabbing me at the time were kind of older artists, quite honestly. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers was a massive one. So I got his greatest hits record. And then I was gifted an album by an older friend of mine. That was one of the things that was great about playing music as a young person. It connected me with folks my age, certainly, but then also with people of older generations who, knew a lot and, had been just kind of doing it and thinking about it for a longer period of time. So they were always sharing stuff with me that I was finding really cool. And one of the things that I got gifted by a friend of mine was a collection of John Prine's songs called Prime Prine. And that record, he had heard a couple of songs that I was writing. I had sort of played him, like, I'm kind of trying to write some songs and see what happens with that. And I played him a couple, and he gifted me that record with kind of, saying to me at the same time as he was handing it to me, like, man, this kind of sounds like what you're trying to do. Like, you should listen to this guy. And you might find some inspiration there, which of course, that turned into a lifelong, I mean, to this day, John Prine is just absolute top of the heap for me. But yeah, and then also just kind of discovering things through those, musicians. I came to find out as I was sort of reading and learning about, these artists, like, Tom Petty's bass player, had produced a record for John Prine that won a Grammy for Best Folk Album, and had one of my favorite John Prine songs ever on it, a song called All the Best. And the record was called John Prine, The Missing Years. And so it was really interesting to see, too, how this stuff that I love was even connected in various ways. And that just really got my brain firing off on all kinds of cylinders as a young person. And I'm really grateful for that, because a lot of folks who do what I do kind of make their bread and butter on one sound. That album might be sort of each album is maybe a different take on that sound or whatever. But for me, I was kind of seeing how all these things were kind of connected early on, even if they didn't necessarily sound the same. And that's kind of led me down a path that's never really been defined by a singular sound other than my voice and songwriting.
You've obviously released albums as a solo artist, but there was a band before, there were a few bands before you went solo, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I loved being in bands, and I got to be in a couple that I really look back on with a lot of fondness. A band called Semi-Precious Weapons, which our first record was produced by Tony Visconti. We were definitely sort of mining a lot of that kind of territory that, you know, folks like David Bowie and the New York Dolls and T-Rex past, that those bands had gone down. I also had a band called the Madison Square Gardeners, which was sort of an attempt to sound something like a combination of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and Johnny Thunders' Heartbreakers. And that was a really fun band. And then along the way, I played with several artists. Mark Cohn, who, of course, won the Grammy for Best New Artist off of his Walkin' in Memphis record in the 90s. Chris Barron from the Spin Doctors. That was a really fun group to play in. At one point, that band included John Popper from Blues Traveler on harmonica, Mike Gordon from Fish on bass, and Joe Russo, who has a really amazing Grateful Dead cover band over here called Almost Dead. Joe Russo's Almost Dead, which are really high level versions of that material. And so it was really fun, kind of being a guy who was sort of helping other artists to bring their vision, to the surface. And at the same time, as I was doing those tours and those records and playing with all those groups, I was always just working on my own music. That would kind of be me. I was never, let's go to the bar and, after the gig or whatever, I would just kind of sit in the corner and work on my songs and try to get them to a place where I thought they were good enough to share with other people. But being in those groups gave me an incredible insight into sort of what it took to survive the music business and hang around in it and be able to, to continue to work and make all those challenging kinds of relationships with record labels and concert promoters and all those things, how to sustain that over a long period of time. And I've been doing that now for this fall is this October will be the 10th anniversary of my first record. So I've been in it for almost a decade now and feel every bit as energized and excited about it as I did from day one. So, and
you're taking the album on the road, right? In the Blazes is
yes.
You're going on tour with that first album. And as I remember when you played the Jesse Malin set, you had that song "The Trouble with Drinking," which the trouble is there ain't no trouble at all. Which was as soon as you said that you had the intention of everyone in that building. I was like, genius.
That was a good day. That song came out of I don't drink anymore, but when I did, I really went for it. that was a period of time where I was really going for it, and I had played this gig, and it was one of these deals where the bar that we were playing at was right across the street from the hotel that they had us staying in for the night, which is always, if in those days, like that was a little dangerous because you didn't have to drive anywhere after the show. You didn't have to worry about parking the car or, any of those kind of things. You could just sort of waddle from the bar back across the street to the hotel, which I did. And I think I got like a pizza or something like that, probably like 1 a.m. And I don't remember any of the conversation with the delivery guy other than just him. He kept asking me, "Are you sure?" over and over again. He kept saying, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, I got to pay for the pizza," not realizing that I had given this dude like over $200 for like a pizza that probably cost $15 or something. I realized that the next day I went to pay for breakfast and just kind of I was kind of driving down the road thinking to myself, like, man, what am I doing? I'm not making enough money to spend $200 on a pizza. But that song, that idea just kind of popped right into my head, how easy it was to squander my hard-earned pay on a pizza. And really, I mean, let's say the pizza was $15 or whatever. That means, 180 whatever dollars of that went to
some markup, yeah,
this man as a tip. And I'm just hoping, like, I don't know, that he was able to use some of that money to finance a cool recording or something groovy like that.
And there's been quite a few albums since then, right? So we had Silver Tears in 2016, which you played a bit of material from when we saw you, including Memphis Rain, which is a great song.
Thank you.
Which was really enjoyable. We've had Karma for Cheap. We've had Tasjan in your last album, Stellar Evolution, which has I Love America Better Than You, which is probably a place that we obviously mentioned at the start when talking about mental health.
Yeah, that song, funny enough, that song was kind of a result of my first sort of viral internet moment that I ever had. It was 2015, actually, when I sort of wrote the very first version of that song, and it was like right after the 4th of July. I had tweeted that, do you know who the singer Lee Greenwood is? He sings that song Proud to Be an American, which is like such an awful, it's so terrible. And they relentlessly kind of play it over here during any sort of patriotic adjacent holiday. And this dude the guy himself is just awful. He's, been quoted as saying super racist, just terrible stuff, and not a cool guy. And so I just kind of messing around, really. And I suppose this was a little bit more of the time where people were kind of being sarcastic in some of their posts and stuff like that. Maybe not everything was being taken so literally. So I tweeted out that Lee Greenwood was actually Canadian, just kind of as a joke. And the tweet kind of went viral, and all of these people that were replying to it and taking it seriously, their responses were just filled with like an astounding amount of vitriol and just kind of, I guess, what they call unhinged, kind of style of posting where, they were just saying the most awful stuff in response to this little joke that I had made. And I just thought, like, wow, this is really fascinating. It doesn't really seem like we're able to have discourse around differences in belief anymore. It kind of seems like people are drawing this really hard-edged line now, where if you're not on their side politically or whatever, they view you as being kind of against them. And, that was the first time I had really thought about that. And it proved to be great fodder for the song. And what's interesting about that song, I tried really hard to write it in a way that didn't take an obvious side, only because I sensed that people were going to be dismissive of something that was too overtly left. And I wanted everyone to hear the song. And in fact, we were playing a show this past fall it was the very end of the summer. And it was in Texas. And the election was around the corner. It was like the end of August. The election was coming up in November. And a guy who hosts a very popular conservative radio show came up to me at the gig and said, man, I gotta say, like, we've been playing that song leading up to the election on my show once a week, and it's led to a lot of great discussion on the show. And I just wanted to say, I appreciate you writing it, and that's a guy who really is probably, like, I don't agree with on a lot of things. But I think that is one of the things that, when you talk about, sort of protest type music or whatever, I think when it's done well, that is one of the powers it's kind of capable of, is sort of bringing folks together who may not necessarily agree, and sort of having that opportunity to still connect with those people is something I've come to really appreciate in a time where everything just feels so divisive and divided, and it's easy to think that kind of everybody's against each other. I like having a song out there that allows me to have meaningful connection or conversation with folks that might otherwise not want to see me or speak with me. So for what that's worth, we talk about like mental health and stuff like that. For me, that's very much tied into all of that. I don't want to feel isolated. I don't want to feel like there's a group of people who are just inherently against me. And I think that sort of critical thinking process of the idea that we just need to find the ways in which we have common ground allows for me to feel like there's no channel or no door that's closed to me, and that I can relate to, many different kinds of people and really be more of a citizen of the world than whatever, little town I happen to be living in America. Because I think, I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and I know that a lot of the sort of bad ideology that folks who live in those small towns maintain is really more of a result of fear than anything else. They haven't traveled anywhere. They don't know how people in the world are really living outside of the little town that they live in. And America is like full of these kind of small towns. And I've really been trying more to play in those kind of places and less focused on just playing in Los Angeles or, New York, or, those places are great. They're cultural epicenters. In New York, you can see any kind of music anytime you want to. You want to see African high life music. Like, there are literally some like dudes like legitimately playing the crap out of that, at a little bar in Brooklyn on a Tuesday night. And that's cool. But I also like going to a town like Effingham, Illinois, or a little town like, Savannah, Georgia, or something like that. And finding that I have things to relate to with those folks. And this sort of idea or myth that those places in America are like devoid of culture or whatever is not true. And yeah, it's just a great feeling to be able to write a song that brings you together with people who, you might not necessarily get the chance to talk to if they're just going off of whatever you're wearing, for example.
Well, I think you nailed it. I think you set out to achieve that, and that's what you've done. So in terms of people listening to that song, obviously there's so much music out there. At the moment, I'm listening to Ways Away still. I've been listening to a lot of your stuff for the pod. I've got back into the Replacements massively. I love Paul Westerberg and the Replacements. I'm in a whole world of Westerberg solo material at the moment. Great to see you're nodding along with that. What about you, Alan? What are you listening to at the moment? What's on your hi-fi, or what are you streaming at the moment?
Well, one that we can definitely, speaking of the great Replacement stuff, one that is a recurring record for me is the Paul Westerberg album Stereo, which is kind of an interesting one. He apparently recorded most of it himself. There's some really interesting moments in some of the songs where it seems like maybe the tape ran out in the middle of the song and he just left that way, as a sort of probably half laziness, knowing Paul, and then also like as a sort of artistic statement as well. But yeah, that's one that definitely sticks around. What else have I been listening to recently? MJ Lenderman has been one that I've really enjoyed, a newer artist that I'm really think has some good stuff happening. The latest Waxahachie record, it's really, really beautiful, really cool. Lovely vocals, great lyrics, simple classic production that just sounds timeless to me. And I think, a lot, like, it's interesting, those kind of words kind of get thrown around a lot in music reviews and stuff like that I see. And sometimes even like like to me sort of misinterpreted as sort of retro or vintage. I actually think there's a difference, and the difference really shows itself mostly in the quality of the songwriting. And people used to talk about, when Bob Dylan came out, they used to say, like Izzy from the New York Folkways Collective there, that cataloged and recorded a lot of those sort of field recording type things that you hear of folk music at that time. But what their comment on Dylan's songwriting was, it sounds like something that could have come out 50 years ago or 50 years from today, and it would still be relevant. And the way that those records were recorded at the time was sort of the modern way of recording them. But it's people playing instruments, usually live, all together on the floor of the studio. And yeah, I kind of enjoy still hearing people do that really, really well. And all those records I've mentioned, whether it's Westerberg or Waxahachie or MJ Lenderman, have that what I call a timeless quality to them, where, yeah, it just seems like the music is coming from a place that is very much now, but also reflective of our history and sort of peering into our future as well. It kind of exists on all, the music sort of exists on all three planes, if you will. And that's kind of what I look for in something that really gets me going and excited. And all three of those artists have that.
So this podcast, Aaron, it's all about, I guess, collating their fantasy festivals. Are you a big fan of the festival? Aaron, have you been to many? Are you a big fan of the festival?
Yes, I love festivals. I've gotten to play some really fun ones through the years. One very fond memory I have of playing over there was the End of the Road Festival in 2017, I think. And I played on the same stage as Lucinda Williams that day. And funny enough, I had just done a few gigs opening for her. So I was friendly with her band, and just kind of had a really fun afternoon catching up with all those folks and playing a really fun set down there in the park. But yeah, festivals are magical places, and I love bands that embrace festival sets by doing something a little different than what they would normally do. Maybe pulling out some weird cover songs or something that you wouldn't expect them to sing, or having a friend who also happens to be playing the festival come on and do a guest collaboration during their set. It's fodder for a lot of kind of once in a lifetime type of musical experiences. So yeah, I really enjoy playing and attending festivals for sure.
And you get to collate your own fantasy festival. So for any first-time listeners to the podcast, Aaron gets to give his fantasy festival a name, a venue, and he gets to pick any 5 acts: an opening act, a Super Seconds act, Midway Madness, a pre-headline act, and a headline act. And he gets to choose one song that all of his acts can play together to bring his festival to a close. I'm really looking forward to doing this with you, Aaron. But before we talk about the acts we're going to make it into your 5, what are you going to call your fantasy festival?
I'm going to call it the Alt Festival. ALT. It's my initials, but I also have always sort of appreciated and drawn a lot of inspiration from alternative music scenes, and I feel very sort of connected with that branding as an artist myself. So I'm going to call it the Alt Festival.
I like it. Great title. And you can hold this anywhere. You can hold it over in the States. You can bring it to the UK. We can go big. We can go small. Anywhere you hold it, Aaron, we will follow you. We'll get anywhere we need to get for the Alt Festival. So where are we going to hold this?
We're going to hold this festival in the wonderful town of Dublin, Ireland, which is my favorite city in the world. And interestingly enough, I have this sort of Armenian last name, and when my grandmother passed away about 4 years ago, we found a folder in one of her pieces of furniture that had all this information about my grandfather that we did not know. He had been an orphan, and in those days talking about that sort of thing was sort of thought to be, you worried that people were going to sort of judge you for not having come up in a proper family environment or whatever. So it just wasn't discussed. And my dad never knew anything about his dad. Come to find out that what had happened was my grandfather's mother was an Irish woman who was betrothed to an Irishman named Donahoe, having at the same time an affair with an Armenian guy named Tasjan. And before the wedding, she became pregnant and didn't know which one was the father. So she got on a boat and came to America, came to Philadelphia, had my grandfather in Philadelphia, and just was finding it very challenging to be a single mother in those days. And so she kind of gave my grandfather up for adoption, but put down the Armenian guy's last name as his last name. Our best guess is like that's who she was hoping the father was, but we're all very pale, and so my dad did like a DNA test after he found this folder and came to find out we're like 80% Irish or something like that. So it makes sense that I've always had this sort of obsession with that culture. And the first city that I ever visited anywhere outside of America was actually Dublin, Ireland, when I was like 3 years old or something like that. My family took a trip there. So that's where my festival is going to be held, the great city of Dublin.
All right. Great, Charles. That's an amazing story. That's a fascinating story. All right, before we get to the 5 acts now, and any acts who you want to shout out who you love but aren't going to make it or join us at the Alt Festival.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that list could go on forever, but yeah. I'll just throw out a few, I guess, who maybe are sort of more on the periphery of my listening, but still stuff that I really love. So my first one is going to be made big shout out to the wonderful Kevin Shields and My Bloody Valentine, loudest concerts I have ever attended in my entire life, bar none. Probably at least half the reason that my ears are ringing right now. So yeah, we'll throw a shout out to MBV. I'm gonna let's see. I'm gonna shout out to Lee Mavers as well.
Great shout.
Major influence. I actually have a Lee Mavers T-shirt. I don't even know where I got it or how I ended up with it. But it is a prized possession. I do have the classic Laws T-shirt with the kick drum on the front as well. But I somehow have a Lee Mavers T-shirt. I don't even know where it came from. And then for my third and final shout out, and these are let me just make sure that I have the premise right. These are artists that could be dead or alive.
Anyone
correct?
You want.
Yeah,
okay. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So my last shout out is going to be a guy who during his lifetime was a remarkable solo performer, a collaborator of John Prine's, and a great songwriter in his own right, a gentleman by the name of Steve Goodman. And if you ever want to just have your mind completely blown, check out go into YouTube and type in Steve Goodman Talk Backwards Live, and he wrote this song called Talk Backwards where he sings about 3/4 of the words of the songs in reverse.
Wow.
In addition to just playing some absolutely mind-blowing guitar stuff over top of it, and it is a sight to behold and to hear. So I highly recommend Steve Goodman Talk Backwards, but he'll be my third and final shout out.
All right.
For the festival lineup.
All right, great acts there. Great acts. So those acts aren't coming with us, but 5 lucky acts are. So at 2:00, we're going to introduce the first act for the Alt Festival. So Aaron, who are you going to have open your fantasy festival?
I am going to have the whole shebang opened up by my main man, Jay Spaceman, and his band Spiritualized. Oh,
great shout. Okay, so why Spiritualized for you, and why are they going to open your fantasy?
There is something very powerful to me about a band that is like that massive. Like just the sheer number of people on stage when that band performs, and yet You can hear every single note that's being played. It's a really, kind of orchestral approach to psychedelic, folk rock or whatever you want to call what they do. And I just love the idea, a band like that kind of setting the stage. To me, their music pulls from so many places that you could kind of go anywhere from there. So that makes them a great festival opener, because whatever follows it is going to feel right.
I think there's always that classic quote, I think, from him, where they asked about the songs he'd written for this new album, and he said, I didn't write the songs. He was like, the guitar. He was like, I just had the guitar, and they came out of the guitar. And you're like, that's amazing.
Right? And they keep making really interesting records, and they're so recognizable as who they are. I had some friends of mine who play in Father John Misty's band were in Nashville a couple of years ago. Father John Misty was playing a concert at the Ryman, and everybody kind of came over to my house to sort of sit on the porch and smoke spliffs and talk and listen to music and just kind of have a fun night off. And I had one of the latest Spiritualized records on at that time. I think it had just come out like a couple months earlier. And the bass player Eli was kind of listening for a second. He was like, man, what Spiritualized record is this? This is so great. And so I love the fact that they've been doing it for so long and they're still making really engaging, cool sounding records that whether you're a fan or not, I think you would enjoy. But for those of us who are, we're able to sort of have that special long-standing relationship, with the band for decades now. And the hits just keep coming. Go Jay Spaceman.
Amazing stuff. So Spiritualized, fourth time they've been picked on the podcast. They're going to open up the Alt Festival. They're going to play from 2 till 3. We'll take a half-hour break. That'll take us to 3:30. It'll be time for our super second act, Darren. So who are you going to have then follow Spiritualized?
I'm going to have a dear friend of mine following Spiritualized, who is a really brilliant singer, songwriter. She has touched so many corners of some of the music that I really love, and has been doing some brilliant solo albums on her own for the last, since about 2014 or 13, I believe, is when her first solo offering came. And the name of this artist is Yola. And for anybody who doesn't know Yola, she, of course, has been making records on Dan Auerbach's label, Easy Eye, for which she's been nominated for over 7 Grammys over here in America, and now is releasing her latest EP. I think came out on a different label, but it's just staggeringly brilliant. She sang with the band Massive Attack for a good period of time as well, but her own solo stuff is just incredible. And she played Sister Rosetta Tharpe in the Elvis movie that came out 2 years ago, I think now. Hard to remember time with the pandemic. But she was absolutely brilliant in that as well. And so, I think my festival is gonna kind of go all over the map musically. And Yola goes all over the map musically. She refers to herself as being genre fluid, which I love. So she'll be next up on the afternoon set there.
All right, great set. So first time Yola's been chosen. She's going to follow Spiritualized. She's going to play for us from 3:30 till 4:30. We'll take another half-hour break, and it'll be time, Aaron, for your Midway Madness set from 5 till 6. So 2 acts down, 3 to go. Who's going to play in your Midway Madness set?
My Midway Madness set is going to be The Strokes, who are, I think, sort of, this might sound strange to say, but I think they're a little bit of an underrated band sometimes in the lexicon of American indie rock and roll music. They the press kind of sort of, I don't know, acted like somehow like their second record was some sort of disappointment in that they felt it was like, Room on Fire was too similar to, Is This It sonically. But I really, as a songwriter myself, like songs are paramount to what I feel sort of gives the project, the album, an overall sense of growth and sort of progressive thinking. And I feel like that, for me, they've pretty much never missed. And a really great live band. Julian is such a great front person. And one of those bands that when you go see now, you forget how many songs that they have that you know. And that's always, I think, a great band for any festival, because even the folks who've showed up to see something else are going to kind of be surprised and dazzled by how much of something that they know that they didn't even realize. So that's going to be number 3 on the list, is The Strokes.
I've been lucky enough to work like in the record company that I work for, and I remember working in the store the day Is This It came out, and it was so hyped up in the UK. I'm sure it was in the States. There's so much hype and so many people coming in to buy the album, and it's pre-streaming, so people had only heard 1 or 2 tracks, and you put the album on, it was just like this flurry of like unbelievable tunes. It's probably one of the last albums like that in a pre-streaming world, where you hit play, you let it play through, and you're like, this is just nailed it.
Quality. One after the next. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. The Strokes, only the second time the Strokes have been picked, but they're playing your fantasy festival. Midway Madness is the Strokes. They're going to play from 5 till 6. We'll take a half-hour break. 3 down, 2 acts left. Your next act, your pre-headline act, they're going to play from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. So, Aaron, who is pre-headlining Alt Festival?
It's going to be Jeff Lynne's Electric Light Orchestra.
Great shout. Why Jeff Lynne's Electric Light Orchestra for you then, Aaron? I think you touched upon them quite early on when you were speaking about kind of your parents and the music, but why are they your pre-headliners?
Yeah, I think for me, they, whether I understood it or not, Jeff Lynne's music has just been a part of my life for as long as I've been aware of music. And that is in a lot of ways due to his music production, as much as his songwriting and work as an artist in his own right. But he has a very definable sound, that as soon as you hear it, whether it's on Full Moon Fever by Tom Petty or Cloud 9 by George Harrison, the Beatles songs that we mentioned that were part of the anthology earlier on, to be able to take a demo, by John Lennon and add the other Beatles voices into it and instrumentation, and have Paul McCartney standing over your shoulder going, "You nailed this," is pretty great. And I think Electric Light Orchestra too is just one of those bands that just has so many songs that are a part of the canon of popular music. Just great fodder for a festival. High energy, really fun show. I got to see them a couple of years ago on one of their reunion tours, and it was just magical. Every note. It's the kind of thing where, as a musician, you stand there thinking like, man, how are they doing this? Like, this is so perfect. Yet it doesn't feel too precious or too restrained in any way. It just feels like a really honest representation of the music. And so pre-headliner, Jeff Lynne's Electric Light Orchestra. I hope they open up with "Don't Bring Me Down."
They can open your festival, Aaron. They can open up with whatever you want them to open up with. Right, they're opening with "Don't Bring Me Down." Only the second time they've been picked for a fantasy festival, but they're pre-headlining yours. They're going to play from 6:30 to 8. It's going to be amazing. We're going to take one more break, and then your headliners are going to take the stage for the Alt Festival. They're going to get 2.5 hours to close your fantasy festival. So a great first 4 acts, but who is going to headline your fantasy festival?
My fantasy festival is going to be headlined by the performer who did the first live concert that I ever attended in my entire life, which was a concert that my dad took me to see at 11 years old. And I'm even going to bring back his original backing band because the live recordings that he did with that group from the Apollo Theater in Harlem, New York, are some favorites ever. And my headliner is going to be James Brown and the Famous Flames.
Amazing. I mean, I guess you, at 11 years old, you can remember that gig fairly well, and it seems like it had a lasting impact on you, right?
Yes, it was so memorable. And I'll tell you this short little aside. At 11, I was obsessed with capes. I had recently seen like Superman and Batman movies for the first time ever, and the cape was like the greatest. At the end of that, he closed the show with "Please, Please, Please," and when his stage manager guy came out and put that cape over him at the end of the show, that was one of the greatest moments of my entire youth. I'd been like wearing capes to school and stuff like that, kind of getting teased for it.
Yeah.
And so seeing this guy like in real life put this cape on, and then everyone, stood up and cheered for him, and I just felt so seen as a young man.
Validation.
I was obsessed with capes. Yes.
Amazing. 7th time he's been picked on the Fantastival podcast. When I was like 11, he played our local park, and no one could believe it. And he turned up and he played it, but I don't remember it very well. I think I might have been younger than 11, but amazing. Such a catalogue of hits, and still adored throughout today.
No doubt.
Still adored. All right, brilliant stuff. So James Brown, it's going to be an insane 2.5 hours, and at 11 o'clock, he's calling back on stage. Jeff Lynne's ELO, he's calling back on stage The Strokes, Yola, and Spiritualised. They're all in your stage in Dublin. You're out as well, Aaron. Let's get you out on the stage as well. And they're all looking at you going, Aaron, what song do you want us to finish your fantasy festival on? So you get to give them the song that closes your fantasy festival. So what are you going to have all of this tremendous lineup play to close your fantasy festival?
Yes. So our big closing jam of the night is going to be While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And at that point, we're also going to bring on one of my favorite guitar players of all time, who played on the live Donny Hathaway album, which is just called Donny Hathaway Live, and it's half recorded at the Bitter End, I believe, in New York, and half recorded at the Troubadour. And this guitar player's name is Cornell Dupree. He's not like a super famous guitar player in terms of, being a Jimi Hendrix or one of those with that kind of name recognition, but he is a massive influence and truly like one of the greatest of all time. I mean, you could ask it, Keith Richards, Elmore James, anybody would definitely give it up for Cornell Dupree. So he's going to be my surprise special guest on that song in particular as well. But I hope it's okay that I changed the rules slightly there just for Cornell.
Anything for you, Aaron.
Man. He's the main man.
Anything for you. All right, so let's lock this in. And we got the Alt Festival taking place in Dublin, Ireland. We've got Spiritualised opening up the festival, followed by Yola and Your Super Seconds. We've got The Strokes, Midway Madness. We've got Jeff Lynne's ELO pre-headlining. For your headliners, we've got James Brown and the Famous Flames. And for your encore, they're all going to play While My Guitar Gently Weeps. It sounds amazing to me, Aaron. Are you happy to lock that one into the Fantastival Vaults?
Yes, indeed.
Brilliant. So before we bring this podcast to an end, you've been a very busy man this year. I can see you obviously supported Jesse. I can see you've been out on the road prior to this as well in the States, supporting a few people here and there. You've obviously got your 10th anniversary in the Blazes coming up. I guess you tell us, what does the future hold for you for the rest of the year, and I guess going into 2026 and beyond?
Absolutely. I'm finishing a new studio album right now, which will hopefully be out early in 2026, and very, very excited about that project. It has a lot of really cool collaborations on it with other artists some of whom I've really admired, some of whom are newer artists whose music I've really been getting into, and so that process of making that has been just life affirming. Honestly, really beautiful. Super excited for folks to hear that. There'll be some more touring. I think we're gonna add a couple of dates to the 10th anniversary tour, which will be getting announced later this week. And yeah, beyond that, I recently co-produced a new album for a singer named Todd Snyder, who's a favorite of mine, a favorite of Jesse Malin's, and many great folks that we all know, love, and respect. That was a really fun project to get to do. I might be touring a little bit with Todd on that this fall when the record comes out. And then just continuing I have sort of a few people that I collaborate with on a somewhat regular basis. One is my dear friend Kim Ritchie. Another is the great Chuck Prophet. And I know already that Kim and I have some plans to write some songs together in July when she gets home from some road work. So that'll be really fun. Yeah. And then just additionally to that, I'm always trying to find ways to support the folks that I love. I think of myself as much of a fan of music as I do as an artist, and I take fandom seriously. So yeah, I'll be really excited to see Jesse Malin's new show that he's working on. That's kind of this Broadway, kind of Springsteen on Broadway type thing that talks about the story of his life, and which is incredibly interesting and touches on so many things that we all know and love. Can't wait to see that come to fruition. So yeah, I'll be on the lookout for anything and everything that I can support as a fan as well.
Amazing. If I don't ask you this question, one of my good mates and the guy who edits the podcast and does the theme music is going to kill me. He asked me to ask you about your Guy Clark story. When I told him you were coming on the podcast, he was like, please make sure he talks about Guy Clark. So you told an amazing story, and we'll close the podcast with a story because it's a great way to end it. But obviously you met legendary guitarist Guy Clark and had quite the experience, shall we say.
Yes, it was quite an experience. The opportunity came through my friend Todd Snyder, who I was just talking about. He had a group called the Hardworking Americans, which had members of Widespread Panic in it and members of Chris Robinson Brotherhood. Chris Robinson, of course, from the Black Crowes. Some really, really amazing musicians, and they had decided to record a cover of one of Guy Clark's songs. And Todd Snyder knew that I was a massive Guy Clark fan and wanted me to meet Guy, and invited me over to the recording session one afternoon. And I went over not knowing what I was in for. And I opened the front door to the studio, and I could hear Guy's unmistakable voice coming from the back of the room. Guy was a little older at that point, and he wasn't feeling great. So he was in a wheelchair, but still just very animated and whip smart and super quick with the cutting jokes and all of that stuff. I was introduced after a period of time to Guy by Todd. Todd said, "Hey, Guy, man, I want you to meet my young friend Aaron. He's he's kind of one of us. He's the songwriter, and he's figuring it out and trying to get it together and all that stuff." And Guy kind of motioned like this, for me to kind of lean down so he could tell me something. He said to me, he said, "You don't have any cocaine on you, do you, young man?" While sitting in a wheelchair. And I just thought, like, man, this guy, like, no wonder he's my hero.
Yeah.
Just never gave up that mischievous spirit that I think really drives a lot of us to see what life will bring us when we're open to experiences that might straight up turn some people off. It's funny because I was just in Texas, where, Guy is from, and I was driving down the highway with a friend of mine. We were opening up some shows for Alejandro Escovedo down there. And we were just kind of talking about how we would, in the early days of touring, we would sort of very purposefully seek out the worst least expensive motel that you could possibly stay at. I'm talking like you walk in the room, the sheets haven't been changed. There's probably some wet towels like on the floor. It looks like someone was just staying there. You might hear some sort of terrible argument happening next door. You know, you just kind of look around at like who's in the parking lot. You're like, okay, that guy's doing a drug deal. That guy's doing a drug deal. That guy's also doing some kind of drug deal. And you would just stay there. You could afford to stay somewhere a little nicer, but you stayed there because those were the kind of places that songs just kind of came to life, and characters were just kind of existing and speaking and saying things in real time that you could write down and would totally become an idea for a song or a lyric in a song or something like that. Guy was one of those people that just kind of went to the end of the rainbow to try to catch a song. And I really related to that, and still find, even though he's no longer with us, God bless him, I still find a lot of inspiration in the idea that he lived his life that way to the end. You know, just in the wheelchair, still looking for cocaine, ready to go. And just big shout out, big love to Guy and his family and all of his fans. So appreciative for all the great music and stories that he gave us. Love you, Guy.
And Aaron, if anyone is listening and doesn't follow you or know where to find you, where's the best place? Where should people hit you up? Whether it's social media or emails, go for it. Floor is yours. Where should people go to find out more about you?
Yeah, I kind of post mostly these days on Instagram. So, you know, at Aaron Lee Tasjan, Tasjan is where to find me there. But yeah, if you just go type my name into the Google machine there, all that stuff will pop up. I'm still on the Twitter, which is kind of a vast wasteland of daily fascinations. Not my posts necessarily, just the general culture over there. Although my posting, I don't know, maybe it is sometimes a bit of a vast wasteland, but that's it's important. Everything in the universe is about balance. So, you know, we can't all be fiery and incendiary at every moment. I like to try to balance it out with a bit of, a bit of sweetness and, just kind of innocence, I suppose.
Fair dues. So what a way to end it. That is it. Thanks for listening to the 179th episode of the Fantastival Podcast. If you've enjoyed this, please subscribe, give the Fantastival Podcast a review. So if you're listening on iTunes, you can subscribe or give us a 5-star rating. If you're listening on Spotify, you can do the same. You can follow, you can rate the show, you can comment on the episode as well. So let us know if you've enjoyed it. The podcast is on Twitter, as is Aaron. So give us a follow if you don't already, at FantastivalP. We can be found on TikTok as well. And yeah, just Aaron, from me to you, a massive thank you for coming on. An amazing guest. I love your stuff. Good luck for the future. When you're back in the UK, I will be there with my pals, giving you a welcome you deserve. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Aaron. Very much appreciated.
Thanks, Stephen.
And lovely.
Great to be here, my friend.
Likewise.
Cheers.
Likewise. I'll be back next week with episode 180. So please make sure to join me for that one. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word. And that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.